Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andris Piebalgs. We again are inviting you for the debate that we make each month. And today's topic perhaps is the most underestimated topic, I think, in the whole energy transition debate. It's biomethane. There is just one example that I would give. BP, for example, has developed 3 scenarios for the transition, so-called new momentum, accelerated, and net zero. And surprise, surprise, in all the 3 scenarios, the biomethane volumes that you would expect stays below 10 BCM. And the same. So that means that there is no real expectations to get something very substantial get through. But with RePowerEU communication, it comes 35 BCM by 2030. It's a target volume that could be and should most probably be achieved. There is known technology, and at the same time, we could ask why things are not moving. So today's debate is about it and also about the Commission's action plan for the biomethane. We have Galin Gentchev from European Commission that will explain what exactly this action plan foresee. Daan from Common Futures that will look on more broader issues that I addressed now in the beginning, why things are not scaling up, what should be done, what are most important. And then my colleague Ilaria Conti will lead the debate with Cyril from Engie and Marilda Dhaskali from Birdlife Europe about what do they think about this action plan? Because if it's not going, there should be some reasons. And what are the issues in action plan that are good, and where are some questions needs to be put upon? So without more from me, now I pass the floor to Galin. Galin, please.
Hello to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to present the plan and to take part of this discussions. After the recent publication of the plan, then we can consider this as let's say starting implementation of the plan by debating about the actions and what should be done. So I'll start with the brief presentation. I'll try to share my screen. I hope you can see it.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so before starting talking about the content of the action plan, so I just very quickly a few words on the political context, things probably which are well known to the audience, but just to put the things into perspective. As you know, the package which surrounded the European Green Deal with the idea to support raising the ambition and achieving the climate neutrality in 2050 already put a place for low carbon and sustainably produced renewable gases. Specifically, there were a lot of let's say proposals. Specifically, also the strategic documents like the energy system integration strategy already presented the vision for the future, where basically the 3 main layers were presented. Obviously, the underground layer, energy efficiency, smart systems, a circular way of running the energy system in order to achieve positive synergies among the sectors, so avoiding any silos. The second, obviously, a key layer on the supply side is electricity, deploying renewable electricity, sustainably produced. But at the same time, it was clear also through all the impact assessments, underlying studies, that full electrification would be either very difficult to achieve or very costly. And this left basically the space for other sustainably produced renewable sources, including the renewable and low carbon fuels and low carbon gases, respectively. which basically also in the projections for the future consumption show that there is a space for gaseous fuels, which would represent something like 20% of the final consumption. So even, let's say, without the current plan, there was a space for biogas, for biomethane, alongside renewable hydrogen and low carbon hydrogen in the future decarbonized energy mix of the EU. So basically, we can see the current plan more reflecting the dynamically also developing, although in a dramatic way, geopolitical situation with the war in Ukraine, which basically was the catalyst for further promoting that production paths and all the surrounding preconditions and the surrounding actions in order to deploy that potential. So now concretely to the RePowerEU plan on biomethane. As you know, it was published through the staff working document accompanying the plan on the 18th of May. As mentioned already, the plan basically raised the bar, so the objective from some 18 BCM, which were envisaged under the Fit for 55, to some 35 BCM, which is considered as ambitious but still realistically achievable target based on the projections also surrounding the hydrogen and gas decarbonization package, which was published last December. As you have seen probably in the action plan itself, it tries to, in order to achieve this ambitious target, then there is a need for a comprehensive set of actions, identified zones and respective actions in order to achieve this and to lift all the barriers, let's say, deploy on the untapped potential in order to achieve that target. That's why there is the plan is a quite comprehensive set of actions trying to cover the issue from all sides. The objective of the plan obviously is to stimulate, to facilitate the increase of the production of biogas and its conversion into biomethane, or directly to biomethane, also from, let's say, supporting innovation. But in any case, all paths which are taken into account in the plan are those considered as respecting the strict environmental criteria, which is also the basis of the Renewable Energy Directive. The rough estimate for implementing this plan is 37 billion euros, which is basically, it's a rough estimate, but it covers, let's say, the investment needed for new installations, for upgrading biogas into biomethane. So basically, in order to, based on some assumptions on the average production and also average cost for such installations. Very concretely, there are several zones identified in the plan. Each zone has a set of actions, and as you have probably seen in the content, basically the content shows that there are a variety of sub-actions which are not identified, let's say, single out, but which are presented in the content, in the description of those actions. So obviously the first zone is about the sustainable production and the use of the biogas biomethane, including all the different levels, the EU obviously, but also national, regional and local level, which are very important for specifically for small, medium-sized installations. And obviously the actions also targeting the gas grid and to ensure the safe injection of the biomethane into that grid. The first and one of the key actions is about creating a partnership or a forum where policymakers on the one side and on the other side, all the key stakeholders, obviously industry, but also NGOs and other key stakeholders, including also primary producers of biomass, for example, can actually monitor, first of all, the development of the plan, the achievement of the target, as well as any and discuss any issues around barriers or other issues that need to be tackled in the implementation of that plan. I'll not be entering too much into detail, but this is a forum which basically is considered very important, since there are many different issues. There is a huge potential to achieve synergies, but this forum is really needed in order to implement the plan. The second important action, which is closely linked to the first one, is basically the requirement to encourage the member states to develop national strategies for the sustainable biogas and biomethane production. Those strategies obviously will cover all these issues, which are in reality in the plan, and will start obviously with identifying the potential of that member state based on the identified sustainable paths, and afterwards develop a set of actions in order to basically deploy that potential, including also tackling any issues which are linked to the, for example, the development of the network and the grid. Also, any issues around gas quality, which may be a barrier, technical barrier for injecting and ensuring the normal flow of the biomethane. Basically, those national strategies obviously are also will be expected to develop the trajectory, a national target with a trajectory to achieve it over time. So this is something which will be important in order to basically achieve the EU target and to develop the untapped potential which is identified. There are other actions which are trying to promote directly the biomethane production and injection, and among those, it's also let's say it's not an inbuilt target, but a consideration to basically enlarge the fuel supply obligation, which is now for the transport sector, to actually enlarge it to cover any biomethane use, which would be let's say a clear mandate for in support for more biomethane into the grid. Another important action is to promote the multi-stakeholder engagement, the multi-stakeholder projects in developing biomethane. There are many good examples around the member states, but it's the majority of these actions is basically streamlining what exists, the good practices, and in order to basically achieve the target. So in this case, there are many different ways of doing this, starting with obviously raising awareness, but also developing the potential and the good practices that already exist under certain also local development programs financed through the rural development funds of the Common Agriculture Policy. In this respect, also reflect around the concept rural-urban linkages, for example, linking regio funds with agricultural funds. Also in that content, we're planning to make a reflection about the benefit and the added value of developing a tailor-made strategy for energy transition in rural areas, which may integrate all these issues. So in any case, specifically in the local regional context, in many cases, the success and the full deployment of the potential of the biogas biomethane production is subject to let's say synergy and cooperation among key stakeholders, including local governments, of primary producers, etc. Another very important action, which is more focusing on lifting barriers and lifting barriers that artificially delay projects, specifically on the permitting, which is also linked to the proposal on permitting, and we'll try to apply the good practices in the area of biogas biomethane production, like for example, creating a one-stop shop for biogas biomethane, or defining a maximum processing time for applications, for assessing applications. An important reflection is sometimes the lack of enough either resources or trained resources at the level of the municipalities in order to quickly and adequately assess such applications. So this is something which will be looked into under this action. And the sixth action in this zone is basically looking into the external dimension of this support for more biogas and biomethane linked to the target, where also the impact assessment for the hydrogen and gas decarbonization package clearly identified a potential from the, let's say, the close neighbors of the EU, specifically in Ukraine. The estimate is about 20 BCM export potential of Ukraine, and let's say, based on discussions we had already with some actors active in Ukraine, also on the financing side, and also based on the existing potential, the impression we have is that let's say the main target of such sustainable production could be the EU, since at this stage, let's say, this potential is not so much probably valued in the local market. So mainly the potential could be the EU, if obviously we manage to integrate Ukraine or also other neighboring countries into the certification system, for example, into traceability system we're trying to build up also for gaseous and liquid fuels in the transport sector. So basically, there is a lot of work to be done in order to integrate let's say neighboring countries with huge potential in this area, and this is what this sixth action is about. So basically, in the second zone, it's more focusing on providing incentives, so biogas upgrading. As you probably know, today only about 3 BCM biomethane are produced. So there is and also based on the impact assessment for the gas package, for the hydrogen and gas decarbonization package, it was considered that it will be easy to actually achieve something like 40 BCM of biogas. The problem would be to provide the right incentives and market to promote the business case for more upgrading, and that's why here we'll be looking into the costs for economic operators. Some of the costs, as you probably know, were already lifted with the gas or the hydrogen and gas decarbonization package. For example, injection costs for low carbon or renewable, sustainably produced renewable gases, or the cross-border booking costs are also lifted. But there are also other costs. For example, there is normally the obligations for TSOs or DSOs to switch such installations, but in areas where the capacity is lower, this would mean, let's say, high technical costs, which so far will be borne by the economic operator. So here we'll have a different reflection about the good business scenario of how this cost could be shared or could be mitigated, that are not only borne by the economic operators, which in reality could represent a financial barrier of entry. So the next zone is about adaptation, adjustment of the existing, and deployment of new infrastructure as far as the EU gas grid is concerned. There are three actions here. The first one, it's also a bit linked to the permitting proposal and what we have been discussing for quite a long time. The first action focus on identifying or fully identifying the existing potential across the EU member states at regional level. As I mentioned at the beginning, regional, local level, obviously linked to the source, linked to the raw materials, is quite important. In order to basically also avoid emissions, to deploy the most efficient, effective use of that biomass waste, biomass coming or waste from that biomass, which could be valorized through this production path. So this is the first action to carry out this regional assessment in matching the potential and what exists. Where basically the work would be should be done by DSOs, TSOs, and the competent national member states authorities in order to, in reality, identify some go-to areas for biogas, biomethane. At the same time, as a result of this assessment, there could be some zones where, despite the fact that there is a potential, there are no, let's say, capacities for the grid to react to that potential increase in supply. And there, the second action is trying to see what are the bottlenecks and how what could be the possible measures in order to lift these technical barriers. The third action, which is linked to that, and something we are currently discussing, is about technical barriers which are linked to the gas quality. Just one example: in some cross-border areas today, there is for example, the oxygen content, the different oxygen content, and the lack of standard about the minimum acceptable oxygen content is an issue in order to basically preventing the flow of biomethane from one country to one EU member state to another member state. So, and today, basically the volume of biomethane is very low, but if we are about to achieve this target, then this will become an issue. So this is something we will have to address as it was done for hydrogen. Another obviously important area is the research innovation and to filling in the gaps. Here, the set of actions basically is building up on what already has been done. There have been a lot of calls or considerable amount of funds already developed through Horizon 2020. There are projects whose results basically will serve as a basis for continuing that work. And obviously here we have in a common sense approach, four zones for action. First of all, the first action targets again the support of innovative technologies for the production of sustainable biogas and biomethane. Here again, the work just continues supporting innovative solutions, mainly on gasification. Although gasification is a quite old technology, but applied to some specific feedstocks or waste-based feedstocks, then to make the business case and to continue working into that direction. Another special area, obviously increasing the effectiveness of small-scale solutions in order to allow this production to be close to the raw materials, so avoiding any emissions, being able to develop the full potential in a decentralized way. So these are let's say among the key areas. As far as the upgrading of biogas into biomethane is concerned, there also already there have been projects will let's say integrate the results of those Horizon 2020 projects. Again, the focus would be on increasing the cost effectiveness and efficiency of a small scale upgrading technology. Among other things, the third action again is on looking into the barriers and integrating the biomethane into the grid. It's more from the, let's say, from the infrastructure perspective. There has been a big project and in that area financed through Horizon 2020, and it's again further work will be based on the results of these projects and to see how we can integrate those results. The four action will focus more on let's say finding other sources of biomass or innovative ways of let's say increasing the source base for more biomethane project again in a sustainable way. So we're not talking about crops or like normal biomass which can be used for food or feed. There have been already some projects in this area as well. So we'll try to further, let's say, develop that work. And the final area, obviously, all this needs to be financed. So the access to finance zone with a set of actions in a logical way tries to find a way and to mix subsidies, grants, and loans. The programs which are currently financing or have been financing biogas, biomethane projects, obviously are the real development funds of the Common Agriculture Policy. Also, some funds have been allocated in the past in the regions through the regional fund. But as well, this type of project could be financed by different sources. So also the idea with the national plans for developing biogas, biomethane potential at the level of the member states is also to link them to the national energy and climate plans and also the national resiliency recovery plan. So like this, basically to link the dots and to be able to achieve synergies also in that area. as far as financial instruments are concerned, for example, we'll reflect on the idea to create more targeted financial instruments with the support with the European Investment Bank, for example, where basically based on special criteria, such installations could be financed. Last but not least, the Innovation Fund also has been financing pre-commercial level projects, so work in that area could continue, although it will not be the main, let's say, focus under the Innovation Fund, but still some funds could be used. So that's on my side. Thank you for being long. Probably I hope it was interesting for you.
Thank you, Galin. It was really a very comprehensive and detailed presentation. And without any hesitation, I would now pass the floor to Daan Peters. Daan has invested a lot of effort with his colleagues looking on biomethane and how to provide the best policies for it. So Daan, the floor is yours. The only request that I could, if you could finish in 10, 12 minutes, I know that you can talk for hours, but we have limited time. That's a kind request from me.
Absolutely, I'll do my best. Thank you, Andris, for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here today. My name is Daan Peters, and I represent Common Futures, a consultancy firm based in the Netherlands, and we indeed do quite some work on the energy transition, including bioenergy. So Galin just explained already the many elements of related to biomethane in RePowerEU and the Biomethane Action Plan. And yeah, I think RePowerEU is really a game changer, and it's great to see the leadership of the Commission there. So a very bold plan to phase out the dependency on fossil fuels from Russia. I think for me, this whole incentivization of biomethane is probably the most surprising element of the RePowerEU plan. It's quite unprecedented what is being proposed there. The 35 BCM targets and all the measures outlined by Galin just now. 20% of imports of natural gas from Russia being substituted by biomethane. And that's just the beginning, because the Commission foresees further growth also post 2030. So in addition to substituting natural gas from Russia and thereby increasing Europe's energy security, biomethane has a number of important benefits that I think are important to briefly highlight. High greenhouse gas savings from well to wheel, but also including avoiding methane emissions when animal manure is being used. So that's an important benefit. Also, high energy system value, so societal value when, for example, biomethane used in hybrid heat pumps in the built environment, for industrial feedstock, high temperature industrial heat, and as fuel for long distance heavy transport. So in my contribution, so for the next 10 minutes, I'll describe how, in my view, the 35 BCM targets could be achieved through mobilizing sustainable feedstocks and investing in capacity. I will then explain, so not just what can be happening this year, but also in the years up to 2030. Also briefly touching on post 2030, how further growth could look like. Then what are the barriers that could prevent this growth, and how can these barriers be overcome, and how can the announced biomethane industrial partnership help there? And finally, perhaps the most important barrier so far, sustainability concerns over biomethane voiced over the years. So starting with what can already happen this year in 2022. Today, and I think Galin mentioned that already, Europe produces about 3 BCM or 32 terawatt hours of biomethane. Already quite a lot is possible this year. The European Biogas Association, EBA, expects about 0.8% of baseline growth already then an additional growth of also 0.8 BCM is possible by increasing the average output of a biomethane plant. So biomethane plants operate today on average 71% of capacity, and that can be increased to about 90% or 8,000 hours per year. So there will be another 0.8 BCM already this year. And then a further 0.6 BCM would be possible by a combination of maybe speeding up construction of already planned and permanent projects, and also partly by upgrading existing biogas plants to biomethane. So in total, this could already lead to 5 BCM this year. The last point that I mentioned, upgrading biogas plants to biomethane, that probably requires some explanation. Today, as I mentioned, Europe produces 3 BCM of biomethane, but it also produces 15 BCM of biogas used locally for local power and not injected into gas grid. So part of this local biogas can be upgraded to biomethane, and that upgrading basically means increasing the methane level from, say, 55% to close to 100%. So a lot is possible already in 2022. So let's now briefly explore how to reach 35 BCM by 2030, starting with the feedstock side. So mobilizing sustainable feedstock. Up to 160 million tons of sustainable biomass would be needed to produce 35 BCM. And I think that can be done largely, if not fully, based on waste and residue feedstocks like manure, agricultural residues, roadside grass cuttings, industrial wastewater, sewage sludge, and food waste. And the potentials for these feedstocks are really huge. For example, manure, animal manure, can produce about 12 BCM of biomethane from manure in large stables, and that potential already takes into account the reduction in livestock units as expected by the Commission up to 2030. I have to briefly wave to the light here to make sure it's turned on. So a lot is happening, a lot is possible in terms of manure. Then a second feedstock category with a huge potential is cereal straw. Europe produces, or cropland produces, about 300 million tons of straw, largely being left on the land today for soil quality purposes, but also a large part of that is already used for animal bedding. So earlier estimated, about 25% of that 300 million tons could be sustainably harvested and used for biomethane. That could lead to about 10 BCM of biomethane. But I think there is a higher potential possible from straw for two reasons. Firstly, if you produce biomethane, then you basically keep all the nutrients. And if you can bring back those nutrients in the form of digest, if you can bring that back to agricultural soils, then you basically have a nutrient recycling practice. So you can take off more straw from soils. Secondly, also straw that is used for animal bedding on stable floors can actually be used for biomethane when mixed up with manure. So first used for animal bedding and subsequently still for biomethane. So these two examples show the very large potential of sustainable waste and residues to produce this 35 BCM. Now, let's take a look at the investment side. So producing 35 BCM requires obviously many new plants. So today, Europe has 1,000 biomethane plants, about 300 in France and about 250 in Germany. Scaling up to 35 BCM probably requires about 5,000 new plants, slightly larger plants. It could be 4,000 medium-sized, say 4,000 cubic meters per year, and 1,000 large plants, say 16 million cubic meters per year. That represents a total investment of about 80 billion euro, or 10 billion euro a year. And that sounds like a lot, and it sounds like a large effort, but keep in mind that Germany alone built 6,000 biogas plants between 2007 and 2014. Granted, relatively small plants, but still just one country and quite a huge scale up. So keeping producing 35 BCM by mobilizing those sustainable feedstocks and investing in new capacity. Post 2030, I see two important levers for further growth. Firstly, gasification, and secondly, sustainable sequential crops, so double cropping. Very briefly, gasification, the process of using woody residues and breaking it down at a high temperature to create syngas, to create biomethane, is commercially proven or tested, but not available today. The Commission Biomethane Action Plan, and Galin just mentioned it, provides or will provide incentives for commercialization. So if successful, this could mean further growth post 2030. The other version, the other lever, sequential cropping, double cropping, so basically growing an additional crop on existing cropland in wintertime next to the current crop. Without causing land use change effects, increasing yields is possible. It's tested in Italy. It is tested also in France. It should not be confused with cover cropping, that is not destined to be harvested. That practice is also included in the Biomethane Action Plan to be tested across Europe. So then, which barriers, so a lot of possible, but which barriers exist in really achieving these targets? Yeah, firstly, and it was mentioned already, permitting, and I'm glad Galin mentioned that the Commission wants to solve this, and we've seen a proposal to this end. Secondly, member states, it's a pretty patchy picture. Some member states like France, Italy, Denmark, Netherlands grow pretty fast. And the Netherlands introducing up to 2 BCM mandate by 2030. But in a lot of member states, not a lot is happening today. So the obligation, as pointed out in the Biomethane Action Plan, for national biomethane strategy will be extremely important. Yeah, and thirdly, investors need confidence, right? There's 80 billion in capex that needs to be mobilized. So today, the good news is biomethane is cost effective. Large plants produce at about 55 euro per megawatt hour. Small plants about 90 euro per megawatt hour. The natural gas TTF price at like 85. On top of that, about 16 euro per megawatt hour for the EU ETS price based on allowance price of 85 euro per ton. So today the picture looks pretty good. However, of course, investors need a longer term certainty. So their contract for difference could help to provide that certainty over the longer term. So no subsidies in the current time, but some subsidies when needed. Or mandates, like in the Netherlands. So national mandates would, of course, also be a way forward. The RePowerEU plan announces the creation of a biomethane industrial partnership. I very much look forward to that partnership being created. So the supply chain, the value chain, working together with the Commission to break down all these barriers and to enable the scale up. Maybe finally a few words on sustainability, because the whole bioenergy debate is, of course, very much subject to a large debate on sustainability that started with in mid-2008 by this note on rising food prices by the World Bank, mainly on the impact of corn ethanol in the US on food price, and that kind of stirred that debate. Land use change, ILUC factors, then came carbon debt. So that, of course, firstly led to sustainability criteria, and then also on ways to address indirect land use change. I think it's extremely important to ensure that the 35 BCM and the further scale up post 2030 are in full compliance, not just with the sustainability criteria, but also avoiding ILUC and carbon debt. That is possible. It is possible by relying on sustainable waste and residues, of course, looking at soil nutrient levels, That is possible by avoiding monocrops, main crops as feedstocks, so maize silage is main crop, but explore the use of sequential cropping, and that is possible by when gasification would be commercialized, making sure that the short carbon cycle biomass is being used for that purpose. So I'm personally very pleased that the debate is moving forward. Sustainable biomethane is now set to grow rapidly, and I look forward to debating and working to make it happen with many of you. Thanks so much.
Many thanks, Daan. Many thanks for these detailed comments. I think they will be very useful now that we open our panel debate. Actually, I would like to ask our panelists to provide, of course, their own vision on how the biomethane plants can actually take place, what is needed, but also, if you want, provide some comments to already what Daan said. He mentioned already many important pros and cons, let's say, of the action plan for biomethane in the future. So I would now give the floor to our panelists, Marilda Dhaskali of Birdlife Europe. Welcome. She's a EU Agriculture and Bioenergy Policy Officer at this, we learned, very important NGO, and which deals with conservation of biodiversity and particularly, of course, of birds. And then we will have also Cyril Harry from Engie. Hello, Cyril, head of gas asset regulation and analysis. So thank you to both of you for being with us. I think we can allow about 7-8 minutes each, if that's okay, so that we can have maybe 1 or 2 questions. Marilda, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, and thank you to the other panelists for their presentation. It was very interesting. So we have been following this RePowerEU with great interest, and actually biomethane production, it's one part of this whole plan, which entails changements also on the efficiency of energy and also on wind and solar. I was just asking to one of the questions in the Q&A box. Anyway, so we think that biomethane could be a sustainable form of energy, provided that the feedstock composition is sustainable. And for us, the whole debate is on what's in this feedstock. Let me just remind you some facts. The first fact is that the largest feedstock contribution for biogas production in Europe, at around 42%, is based on crops. So there are some discrepancies between member states, but the overall picture is that today biogas is produced mainly on crops. And there are there was different reports to foresee how we will have, what kind of feedstocks we will have. And the Institute for Energy of Heidelberg published this very, very good report. It was released now in May 2022. And the results was that the realistic and sustainable case of biomethane production was not 35 BCM, but was more about 17, 18 BCM, which is the amount that was initially foreseen in the Fit for 55, actually. So the RePower Europe just doubled this production of 35 BCM. So for us, the problem is that there are 2 different scenarios, realistic scenarios. The first is that this 35 BCM will be reached if we mainly use crops. I think that it was Sir Daan Peters who said that these crops would be sequential crops. The problem is that across the EU, cover cropping or even intermediate cropping, it's rarely applied. So you have just less than 3% of areas. Also, these cover crops are generally low yielding. And so the only intermediate crops with actually high yields will need nutrients and water. Thus, they are hard to distinguish from major crops, actually. Also, the realistic composition of feedstock in the case that 35 BCM should be produced, this means that we would need to or heavily rely on food crops or heavily rely on manure. And both are really not a good idea. It's maladaptation regarding biodiversity loss and climate change. Because if we rely on food crops or even crops, this means that 5% of the total arable land in EU would be flagged for biomethane. And this is not possible. It's not possible to use so much land for energy. This is on this amount of land, we would grow about 20% of the European wheat production. And on the other hand, the other scenario would be based on manure as the bulk of the feedstock. Mainly, like half of the BCM would be done with manure. So even if it's assumed that only livestock kept indoor is available for manure utilization, this would lead to increase industrial livestock densities, whereas we are facing unsustainable densities from this sector, which is fueling biodiversity loss and climate change. And also, so we don't need to increase our livestock, and giving money, providing incentives to farmers to use manure would mean that they will use this money to increase the livestock densities. So we don't think that 35 BCM it's realistic unless we if we go to unless we use sustainable feedstock. For us, sustainable feedstock would be waste, municipal solid waste, bio-waste, agriculture waste, but not crops per se or manure. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marilda, for being so clear and in highlighting your two realistic scenarios. I will give now the floor to Cyril, also with the same invitation to, of course, bring your own vision on the whole biomethane development, but also if you can address the points that Daan and Marilda already highlighted and give us your comments on that.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. I'm very glad for the invitation of the Florence School of Regulation to this quite important debate on this major topic. So biomethane, as introduced by Andris earlier, is back on scene, on the stage. And the topic is not easy to handle, neither from a business development nor from a policy perspective. Marilda just pointed out the case that the first important things to do is to assess how to ensure development of sustainable biomethane, depending on the feedstock used. And I think that the first action proposed in the biomethane action plan, as described by Galin earlier, is first to have the industry itself assessing and discussing between the exact potential which could be used and developed regarding the objective of 2030. And I think to have a clear assessment on this is a prerequisite to ensure to all stakeholders and citizens that the new biomethane plant, which will be commissioned, clearly contribute to have some environmental benefits and contribute to the decarbonization process. So that thing is very important on this point. The 5 other action proposed also looks relevant and needed our good ingredients in order to be able to reach the 35 BCM target. So what we are aware of, notably thanks to the presentation made by Daan earlier, is that theoretically, the potential is quite big in the long run. And the key issue is to assess how to gear up the development of biomethane for the coming years in a sustainable and reliable way. And I think for that, having a common European framework is needed through the European roadmap as proposed, and to leave some flexibility to member states, not only to give priority to the filière for which the local geographical features would suggest that for some countries it's that type of organic waste which should be geared up, whereas for other countries it can be another type of feedstock. It's up, let's say, to member states and at national level to decide which kind of category of biomethane should be developed. Regarding the financial tools, Daan also made a review on the possible tools to incentivize production, pointing out the case of CFDs, and CFDs alike for green power generation can be a tool as part of other tools such as incorporation obligation. There is already some feed-in tariff existing in a few member states. So I think that what is needed is to have a European framework in which member states can play with to decide in the implementation policy what kind of levers or options should be privileged depending on the local features. And what is also important is to ensure that development strategy into the national energy and climate plan. So in the RePowerEU roadmap is proposed as the action 2, and we think within Engie that it's clearly relevant and needed. Also, what is very important is to set some cooperation with third countries. And I think in the chat there was one question with regard to Ukraine. Clearly, Ukraine has a big potential for developing biomethane, not only for its own decarbonization needs, but also can be a contributor to the decarbonization of the European Union as a whole, considering the massive, powerful agriculture industry. And regarding also the question of broadening the scope of a fuel supply obligation in the RED II directive, indeed, that thing should be investigated really in detail and at European level, because what we should bear in mind is that in the Fit for 55 package, there is a widening of the scope of the ETS scheme and obligation in the coming years, and meaning that more and more end users will be exposed to the ETS obligation and constraint. And as an answer to meet that obligation, enlarging the perimeter of biomethane end user probably is the good answer in order to incentivize those gas end users to lower their carbon footprint by incorporating biomethane. And clearly, the action 3 proposed in the roadmap biomethane action plan is also relevant. And I think that should take place not only in the transposition of the current RED II directive, which is still to be transposed, which is not an easy task at all, but also there is also some discussion on the upgrading of this RED II directive to the RED III directive. And I think if there is one additional point to add on top of the action plan proposed is to ensure the 35 BCM objective for 2030 into the future RED III directive, because it will pave the way of the development of the filière as a whole, not only for decarbonization purposes, but also to lower dependency to fossil fuel. And if the RePowerEU plant propose an updated target 35 BCM, it should be onboarded in the RED III directive. This is one of the, I would say, key requests we have as Engie, and I think if there is one point to add on top of the proposed one, that 35 BCM objective within the RED III directive should be done, should be incorporated. The last word from mine on this at that stage is that we should also keep on working collectively on the current transposition issue we have been facing in the RED II directive for biomethane and sustainable biomethane development, because today we don't have many cross-border biomethane exchange through guarantees of origin. There is a discrepancy between the guarantees of origin for green gases versus the sustainability certificates, mainly dedicated to the transport sectors. And there is still some streamlines. There's some things to streamline on this in order to improve the existing legislation. And this is needed at the European layer, because if we don't solve this transposition issue in the coming years, the filière will not gear up. We need to have the regulatory provision as a mean to enable the filière developing itself in a sustainable way. And beyond the increase objective at 35 BCM, we also need to address the existing issue with regards to national goals registries. We think also that the guarantees of origin instrument as a whole need also to be upgraded in order to incorporate within a goal the sustainability information. And what we think beyond, let's say, individual standpoint and request is that today we have some technical issue and work still to be done in order to streamline the existing legislation and to onboard this in the new RED III directive to be able to make the new 35 BCM objective by 2030 happening. So technically and physically, probably we are able to do that in a sustainable way. There can be some various pathways to make it happening, to achieve that. And the regulatory part will be absolutely instrumental. And on top of national measures which could be implemented, driven by the biomethane action plan, some European provision need to be strengthened or further defined in order to have a common European framework to make that objective happening.
Thank you, Cyril. Thank you very much. Very comprehensive overview. I would and thank you also to all the panelists today and to the speakers, because I saw that you replied to the questions in the chat directly. So thank you. This is fantastic, and I really much appreciate. So at this point, I would just give the floor back to Daan for a quick reaction to Marilda and Cyril's interventions, and then to Andris for a conclusion. Please, Daan.
Thanks so much, Ilaria. Yeah, maybe just one quick comment on the feedstock availability, because this can lead to some confusion. My story was there is plenty of feedstock, also sustainable, and Marilda basically mentioned, no, it's all going to be crop-based, it's all going to be first generation. Marilda, the publication you mentioned of EFOI is a recent piece funded by the European Climate Foundation. It basically takes the ICCT scenario, which is already quite conservative, presents it as the best case, knocks off another 50%, and presents that as a realistic case without any evidence why this second reduction would be needed. So, yeah, I don't see that as a very thorough piece of work on what is possible. I would love to speak to you and to the authors about how to really look at the feedstock potentials from a sustainability perspective, but yeah, I don't think based on that report we can conclude that only 80 BCM of sustainable feedstock is possible. Thank you.
Well, for me, to conclude, I believe that also I was looking for your comments in chat. Definitely the issue of circular economy, energy independence, need for clean molecules for hard to decarbonize sectors. Everything really shows that we really need to manage this biomethane potential inside the EU, because we will need energy that is provided, and certification from outside will be challenging task. I'm not saying that imports is difficult, but that is easier in energy community, more distant, it will be more challenging task, because that's really where the risks are coming, that you could undermine good work that we're doing. I think we could congratulate Galin for really very, very important work done by the Commission, but we clearly know what Daan, Marilda and Cyril said, that this work needs to be continued, because it's rather like to work on thin ice, I would say. So you definitely can reach the other side of the river, but you should be careful not to make mistakes, but at the same time you also can't lose the time really to wait until the ice will be more thick. So we have also time pressure, and I believe that today's debate shows that we can do it, but it requires this common approach. And I think for biomethane issues, it is really what Commission proposes, industrialization, and trying really to get all the stakeholders very closely together is definitely one of the keys. Another I would suggest from my side to look a bit about a trajectory, because we have in all areas very ambitious target. But for me, biomethane seems the simplest actually compared with energy efficiency target or increase power capacity of renewables. This is really something that could be scaled up because technology is there, and Daan also made a very good presentation for feedstock availability. So really, I would wish that Commission really continue to follow it up, because we need a common driving force, careful and responsible. And I would again thank Galin, Daan, Marilda and Cyril, and my colleague Ilaria for taking part in the debate. Thank you very much, and have a nice remaining of your working day.